Welcome to another edition of the Scannell Agenda. My name is Stephen Jeffrey Francis Scannell. Today's date is April 28th. Happy birthday, Emily, my daughter. 2018. Show number 87, entitled, What's in the Sewage Tea? I have to work hard to pronounce my words because my left side's paralyzed. Somewhat, partially paralyzed. Got that palsy going on. So if I'm making faces, it's too bad. It's kind of funny. What's in the sewage tea? I've been writing up sanitation systems for many years now. And the sanitation systems are kind of like, in this stage in the game, it's kind of like trying to push the naturopathic medicines or some natural healing therapies or some Reiki touching, and it's kind of weird. People think it's kind of weird, but I don't. And as a matter of fact, I had the best conversation yesterday down in Wellfleet. My wife and I were honeymooning yesterday. We like to go for a little ride, mix a little business with pleasure. And I met Tom Flynn, who's running for selectman in Wellfleet. And he's a civil engineer with a lot of experience with the sewage plants. And we were talking about my system, about sewage in general. And I've been listening, learning things that I haven't known before, such as eventually the cost for doing it the old-fashioned way, I call it with the dinosaur method, you know, the centralized sewer plant and all the pipage. That is going to cost us Cape-wide, with everyone on the sewage, you know, hooked up. I forget, but I think it was somewhere between $7 and $11 billion. So if you add Cape Cod with, let's say, Wareham, Nantucket, all the towns on Martha's Vineyard, you're probably looking at 20 billion, I'm just guessing. That'll be the end result. So now's the time to do a little thinking. Now, my systems, I believe, are better, high quality systems, and they're cheaper. I believe they're cheaper in the long run, simply because we're using our bioproducts, our urine, number one, and our fecal matter, number two. We're using those as fertilizers. So in that we're going to use our bioproducts, as I call them. Now what we're looking at is production, as opposed to we're trying to gather up some of the waste products, and we're trying to poison these and hide these. And I was on Facebook, and there was a pretty popular woman there. She's a doctor, PhD, and she was saying, you know, the effluent from these sewage plants, unless you have really good tertiary treatment, which I guess is possible, and there goes the, you know, skyrocketing costs here. You're going to have everything from CVS ending up somewhere in our, you know, pond areas, and you know, unless we put it to sea, which I like, as I say, the roots to the reef. These are one of my many projects. I think I have about 250 categories that I work in. So sewage treatment is one of my categories. I just call it sewage. And to me, the challenge is, number one, economic. So I figured that what we would do would be to use my fisheries system, market quota system, which is a generic form of public resource management. And that basically taxes what you don't like, and it incentivizes what you do like. All right, so with hybrid naturopathic sewage system, call it what you will, I call it part of the green grid transit system because of the monorail system I've got designed. I figured, well, we're going to have all these conduits available. So that's a little ahead of everyone else. And the green biotreatment for sewage may be a little bit ahead, but it wasn't ahead of this guy, Tom Flynn, running for selectman. I hope he wins. I'm not going to put this show out before the election, though, before the Harwich election. This show won't come out because I'm running for selectman, and I'm talking about him running for selectman. So I can't be getting into politics here, that kind of politics. I guess it's not proper. So what's in the sewage tea is partially drainage water, which has nothing to do with sewage. Partially it could be hay or eelgrass or some mix of organics or alfalfa or what have you. Forest products, go in the forest and, you know, chip up some trees and rake up the forest area and get the organics out. It could be that partially. And so that's the dry. I call that the dry. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is the grapey, as I've explained, and that is really the highest and best use of the whole system, is to just, first of all, you just segregate out the cream. That's the cream, that's the best. That's our shower water, our sink drainage, and sometimes they say, oh, you got to be careful of the kitchen sink. Okay, that may be true. And then the shower, the sink, and then urine only. And they have separation appliances and toilets for that. So that's number one, and that's the best. And that's, poundage-wise, I'm thinking that's probably 80% of what we're looking at. So that's the cream of the crop, 80%. But then we go ahead and we mix everything and put it into the sewer pipe. And that's the flushing of, the toilet with our number 2. And that's number 2 here, as I have it listed, is black water, no solids, filtrate. With appliances everywhere, hooked up to every toilet, let's say, here on the Cape and Islands and Wareham. I thought I'd come up with a zone. So that would be our green sewage zone. That has more to do with the ocean than anything else. Access to the grow-out grounds for eelgrass, which would be southwest of Nantucket, about 20 miles, in my mind's eye. So that would be an appliance at home. So that's in the tea, you might say. What's in the sewage tea? But that's separate, that's a separate pipe, because we separated out the grapey, gray water, and pee or urine. And that's the good stuff. That goes right on the plants. Let's say we have potted plants, and I just found something here this morning. I said, oh, that kind of looks like, okay, that kind of looks like tankage to me. All right, do you remember the old beehive septic systems? I do. Those were good. So let's just say this is an old-fashioned beehive. You can cross this with this soccer ball here. And so you've got your bio tank. It may be sealed, or it may be that you have a catchment underneath of that. And so there'll be tankage everywhere because we're separating. So, you'll have this 1, 2, 3, 4. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. This one might be number 4, which is just drainage water. This one might be 2, which is black water, no solids. And this one might be number 1. Well, this one probably, more like it, would be number 1, grapey. And this one would be, let's say, number 3, the dry. You'd have the dry, meaning if you have an appliance in your home which would run some organics, or in a school, or in a business, or, visitors services, new bathrooms. It's part of a tourist attraction too, actually, all this stuff. It's all part of the blue economy, which I've talked about quite a bit. And blue means water. All right, so this might be a grapey tank, you know, segmented big tank. It might be in a neighborhood. You might have one small tank at home, and then your small tank at home would pump under pressure. Doesn't take a lot of pressure to get, quarter mile away to a bigger tank. And then you might have an automated vehicle that comes from underneath your fire department building, and then it would come to these various locations and pick up and then drop off. Might be a short drop off too. Or we might pump directly to the sewage treatment, bio-sewage treatment, and that might be planted pots of, let's say, bamboo mixed with some other trees. Could be willow, it could be some other trees. And there are other people that know a lot more about this than I do. This guy, Tom Flynn, was talking about trees that I'd never heard about for this purpose. And so we may be piping this stuff not too far away. You look at some trees, you don't know what you're looking at. It's biotreatment. It's closed system. And if it rains, you might have an umbrella over it. So to stop the rainwater, you may not want the rainwater. You might want some rainwater. It just depends what you want. You might have a rim around just in case flooding, but most likely that would be almost invisible. So we're talking about our number one product, that's gray pea. That's the shower water and the urine. So that's about 80%. So that's how hard is that to accomplish. And then pots with red maple, let's just say. You have a bunch of red maple, and these trees here might be your red maple trees or what have you, and a mix of different plants and trees and grasses, etc. This is all fun stuff to think about. And I believe the urine is highly charged with some chemicals we don't want to be putting back into our environment, and they come from anywhere. I like to quote CVS. That's pharmaceuticals, but it could come from, you know, we have all kinds of products in our home. They'd end up getting flushed down. So the beauty of a closed system is, the beauty of my design of these closed systems is that you take the roots. After a while, because we use salt, right, in our food. So the saltification probably has ruined civilizations. If they use their own bioproducts as fertilizer, then the soil becomes degraded because we're salt-loving animals, and the salt can ruin the soil. And I guess there are other things besides salt too that ruin the soil, but you get the picture. The soil can be worn out in this way. But I don't know all about that, but I know that we have to keep these systems as closed systems. So if you have a pot of, let's say, red maple, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. And it's simply because some engineers were at a meeting in Hyannis, and they were singing the praises of this failed septic system, saying, well, it's not failed, but we have to say it's failed. It's not up to code now, because actually all the roots were into the leaching field, and they were uptaking all of the nutrients, and they were so, inundated that probably not much was getting down, percolating through the sand after those trees were done with the effluent that came out. So you got to scratch your head and say, why aren't these engineers coming up with these good systems? I think they want to. But it's like, why aren't fishermen coming up with these great fishery systems? Maybe some of these fishermen want to, but I think the whole thing is people are scared. They're afraid. I think things are too engineered these days. I don't know. That's kind of a nutty opinion, but that's my opinion. It's my daughter's birthday. I was going to mention my family life isn't good at all, and it's because of this pond case. And then the aftermath punishment of the pond case where the cops coming in, you know, the cops in politics. So if you read 1984, you'll dwell on, you know, your civics lessons and why the police are not in politics. Why aren't the police in politics? Well, you don't know, right? I know. And nowadays we're looking at the FBI and Trump says, isn't it a shame, you know, they're corrupt. I knew that years ago because they were corrupt, and they showed their corruption in my case, working with the state police, Massachusetts State Police, and a lot of corruption. And I heard him talking about this James Comey, and someone described him as a drama queen, kind of a drama queen. You know, we need good, solid people that know their job and they know enough to stay out of politics in law enforcement. So I think we got a clean house. Or as I say, drain the swamp. I really do think we need the swamp drained. Either that or I have like 8 major mental illnesses, right? So to bail out the cops, that has to do with my case and a DNA switch. But let's get back to the sewage. All right. A more palatable subject. I think I did some shows on sewage, and let's see, where would that be? Well, let me just go through this, and I'll give a quick, because this is my mix of stuff. Number 1, fisheries and energy systems. That was my first show. And that was all about my designing of the Georges Bank mega mill, and then going with compressed air and hydrogen as our fuels of the future. And then that turned into a monorail system, and everything attached to these windmills on Georges Bank and other places would be heavily tied in with cables, and this would be all where you attach your tire reefs, so there'd be a 5 or 10% fisheries component with every windmill and that kind of thing. Okay, that was show number 1. Show number 2, social services and recycling. So I get into these recycling systems. For years I was recycling on Nantucket religiously. And then I get put into this social services thing, or I put myself in. However you want to look at it is fine with me. But I went into the system after working full-time for a couple of years. I said, I don't like this. I don't like getting treated like this. I'll just go into the system, see how they like that. So I did. They didn't like it. They didn't like it. So my first trip was like 30 days after that, they put me in jail for non-payment of child support or something. It was like under $2,000. So that was 4 months in jail. And then they let me out after 30 days because they couldn't get me back in Taunton State Hospital. So I'm not in love with the police. And I hate the judges. And I hate the lawyers. That's how I am because of all this mess. But we can get out of this. One of these shows was, I'll get to that, a constitutional amendment. That's show number 5. Okay, show number 3, the Presidential Scallop Hotel. That's about industrializing our aquaculture instead of, as we were on Nantucket Marine Laboratory, we were using these old Chinese little lantern nets and methods, and we were even doing this with the strings and tying things up. And I'm like, this is not American style. This is China style, where they can pay 50 cents an hour. Hello, we have to pay at least 14 bucks an hour here to get anybody to do anything. Okay, show number 6, the clean vote system. That was all about my system to have a check the math. So you have two counts going on. You've got a hand count and you've got a machine count. And the machine is isolated. It can't be tampered with. And so you have paper ballots, and then they get counted partially by hand. Okay, this one, you pick that box and that box. And then the machine count is labeled right on the box. Everything's right out in the open. Everything's clear plastic. And you can't tamper with the vote machine. It has a program that is non-tamper. It's tamper-proof because you'd have to rip apart the box to get into it. And everything's numerical from 1 to 500, and it counts everything from 1 to 500, and it's not programmed. And there's no programmer that gets in there and can rig anything. So that is a very simple check the math system. Your hand count checks your machine count. Your machine count checks your hand count. Okay, you're all set. Isn't that what the teacher told you? Check the math? So that's clean. It's a clean vote system. And it's very hard to get in there and tamper with that. So show number 7 and show number 8, a proposed evacuation plan for the Pilgrim nuclear plant eventuality where it melted down. And the crux of it was I have this aquaculture gear designed to get us off of the Cape, or to move us by sea. Also by rail, also by plane, also by truck and bus and everything else. So it's a multi-pronged approach. But the best common sense you'll ever see in your life on this issue is the fact that, okay, which way is the wind blowing when we have a meltdown? And they're not doing that. I looked at these emergency evacuation plans, and they don't give a thought to which way the wind is blowing and what the trend of the wind is, velocity of the wind, but that's everything, especially because the canal is about 13 miles away. And if we heard here in Dennis or Harwich or Chatham, oh my God, the plant is melting down, everyone evacuate the Cape. Guess what? Most people would run for the bridge, and they're going to get tied up right there. And that is probably a good chance that might be where the wind is blowing or trending toward blowing, right there at the canal at the bridges. And you're dead. You'd be safe to stay at home in Chatham or Harwich or Dennis. You'd be safe at home, but you'd run for the bridge, and that's where you might either die or become a walking dead with all the cesium and thorium that comes from a nuclear plant melting down. I can't believe that we're not actively planning for a meltdown with that particular broken down old boat of a nuclear plant. I just can't believe it. We're taking a huge risk. And I'm not going to go through all the news. That's terrible. Okay, the tripe system, show number 9. The tripe system means track pipe. T-R, track, I-P-E, pipe, track pipe. And that's about bundling pipes with energy and utilities. The energy, the green energy fuels of the future are hydrogen, compressed air, and oxygen-rich compressed air. The big deal about that is that they are also storage pipes. So they're shipment and storage of green energy, and that is what solves the energy crisis, if it's doable for us to build these pipes. It is doable now because you're carrying a monorail system with the dovetail tracks. I've explained this. And then you're also carrying other uses, which is sewage, water, sewage sanitation, all kinds of sanitation pipes needed, water, all kinds of water pipes are needed, and then natural gas. Maybe there's some different types of natural gas. You could carry anything basically in the pipes, including granulated plastics that are recycled plastics, almost you name it. And then these track pipe systems, tripe, or I call it now the Green Grid Transit System. They have pods for pallets and people, and you know, in addition to the trains, which will morph into subway trains, but it's got everything. So why should we care? Because I'm in a fight with the cops, right? A fight. He's in a fight with the cops. Well, the cops jumped in to a political fight. They jumped in, okay? So I'm a legitimate activist. the cops are not legitimate jumping into a political fight. It happened with the Dukakis administration, Weld administration, way back then. And that was indicative of oligarchy way back then when Weld was making the big money deals with the big money people. That's when the oligarchy started. Okay, fisheries and heartsick about the drugs. So that was 2 shows, 10 and 11, heartsick about the drugs. I've seen a lot because I've been in these social services, so I've seen all the hardest of the hardcore cases where they, throw up their hands and give over the person to the psych system because they're so burnt out that the psych system gets them. And that is prevalent now. I'm opposed to it. I think psych cases should be with the psych cases and drug cases should be with the drug cases because I've seen a lot of the drug cases victimizing innocent disabled people who have natural disability. So I've had it up to here with that situation. That's why when I talked to Elizabeth Warren, Senator Warren, a week ago or so, and she did this opioid thing, I had the answer. I wasn't called upon, but I talked to her afterwards. And the answer is Clubhouse, and that's standard. But freestanding with the deed, none of this agency making all the money. And then something I call J&B, which is my invention. Job in a bunk, it's not my invention. This is what people did years ago. Okay, if someone needed a job in a bunk, they'd end up with it somehow. Community would step forward. And then 3 would be town nurse-based system, which I've gotten into, and that is a system whereby you have, an ambulance district, let's say, or in the case of Harwich, it would be the town of Harwich, would have a town nurse board, and then an oversight board for that board, which would be bigger, and then moderators. It would be quite involved, but it would take a lot of the waste away from our social services. And it would be, let's say, 75% less money with 75% increase in quality of life. It's just an astounding turnaround. Because these systems get old. They do. They get so old, they're decrepit. And our social services are kind of decrepit. All right, that's it for the Scannell Agenda. Thanks for watching.